Back then in 2007, the oil and gas industry was booming. So I got a job as an electrical engineer in a company called NOV. And then about 4 to 4.5 years ago, I had the opportunity to do something very different with Amazon Web Services. And I basically took that opportunity. It was a new challenge and I wasn't sure what I was getting into, but eventually it worked out very well.
Sometimes we have a bias, like we cannot move from one industry to another, but here is a live example how Nishant have made that transition.
I think the angle I took, you always have to find the angle that you want to take to make a pivot to a new industry.
Lots of skills can be transferable and that can help you to achieve success in whatever industry you are working on. How investing help you to grow in your career?
Of course, the big elephant in the room is AI, right? How does AI change the enterprise? How does it change accounting, finance, energy trading, how we explore for energy? The biggest thing with investing that helped me in my professional career was I was always interested to see how I can predict the future. You're either right or wrong, right? There's no maybe. So whether the stock goes up or down. So it's not a debate. So if you had a bias on a certain technology and you felt that's the future, you go invest and the company goes down, you realize that maybe your bias is not right. You should always think big. You should always aim for the stars. And we say that, but we don't usually do it, right?
Thinking big, curiosity, and also learning from the people outside your industry. This is the Oil and Gas Breaking Bias show, where we are going to invite industry leaders to talk about their journeys and also technologies of tomorrow, in an effort to break some of the biases that might have formed around this energy industry. Good morning, everyone. I'm Anand Jha. I'm a global head of process industry sales at ABB System Drives. And you are listening to the Oil and Gas Breaking the Bias podcast. And I'm very happy today because I will be joined by my friend Nishant Gadiraju, who works for AWS Amazon, and he's located at beautiful Calgary, Canada. Welcome, Nishant. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for this discussion. And I'm excited to share my experiences.
Thanks for joining me today. We were talking about this thing or having podcast for a long, long time. So now today is a day when you talk about your inspiring story so everybody could learn from it. So before we deep dive into all the details, I will say, can you walk us through your personal and professional life and how you achieve the things where you are today?
Absolutely. Yeah, let me start from the very beginning. So I grew up in India, in New Delhi. And then at the age of 17, I moved to the US. And I finished my electrical engineering degree from a school called Texas A&M, which is just outside Houston. And then right after that, back then in 2007, the oil and gas industry was booming. So I got a job as an electrical engineer in a company called NOV, which I think many of you might be familiar with. They're electrical engineering, mechanical manufacturing company that supplies equipment to the oil and gas sector. So I worked there for about 4.5 years. I spent a lot of time in the manufacturing facility and then also the site. And after that, I got really interested in the commercial side of the industry. So I started getting into sales and BD, and I started supporting our sellers from a technical standpoint. So that was more of an inside sales role. And from there, I moved into business development, product management, and eventually account management. And the journey was through NOV and then Siemens and a few other companies in between. So I spent a lot of time in the electrical sector as well. So power generation, power distribution, etc. And then about 4 to 4.5 years ago, I had the opportunity to do something very different with Amazon Web Services. And I basically took that opportunity. It was a new challenge and I wasn't sure what I was getting into, but eventually it worked out very well. And I think right now we're in a very exciting time in technology where it's transforming every aspect of the economy.
Coming from heavy industry to technology industry. Yeah. And sometimes we have a bias, like we cannot move from one industry to another, but here is a live example how Nishant have made that transition. So can you tell us a little bit more about it, what you did to make that transition?
Yeah, I think Anand, that's a very good question, right? what I realized is no matter which industry you're in, I think everything is connected, because we all work in one economy where everything is connected. So your experience on a topic A is useful in industry B and vice versa. If you look at the energy industry, it's I would say a combination of different technologies coming together, whether it's finance, engineering, marketing, IT, and they're all coming together for an energy company to operate and deliver for their customers. So, I think the angle I took, you always have to find the angle that you want to take to make a pivot to a new industry. So the angle I took was, look, I have this sales experience. I know how to work with customers. My experience from previous companies like Siemens and NOV have taught me a lot about equipment, control systems, etc. And I thought I could leverage that experience with Amazon where, they are delivering cloud and cloud-based solutions to energy customers. So they need people who understand the energy landscape, who understand the customer's business drivers, and they need someone who can connect the dots between the customer's needs and pain points to the services and the technology, whether it's AI, machine learning, that Amazon can deliver. So that was an angle I took, and I think that worked out very well.
So what you are saying, like your skills were transferable from heavy industry to the software industry.
Yes.
And from outside it looks totally two different world, but it's not. But it's not in reality. Lots of skills can be transferable, and that can help you to achieve success in whatever industry you are working on.
Yeah, I think
That's great. Like,
one thing I'll just
yeah, go
say
ahead.
on that is, you know, generally the principles of customer service, trying to understand the customer's pain points, trying to dive deep into a problem, whether it's a technical problem, commercial problem. So the ability to do that and find solutions, I think that's transferable to any industry. And I think that's the common thread there.
And that makes sense. So you're working in this industry for a long, long time. I'm talking about both industry, heavy industry and the software industry. But what changes do you see today? Like where this industry is going towards?
Yeah, I feel, we're in a very exciting time in the energy industry as a whole, right? There's the traditional oil and gas, then there's the traditional electric utilities, right? And they are both transforming, where in the oil and gas side, we'll need oil for many decades to come. But companies are looking at exploration and production in a very different way. So it's all about, how do we use technology? How do we do things smarter? How do we automate things? How do we leverage data to make better decisions, to automate things, to make things safer, etc. So I think there's a lot of potential where we need people who understand both sides of the world, or let's say willing to understand both sides of the world, whether it's the traditional world or the technology. And then, of course, the big elephant in the room is AI, right? How does AI change the enterprise? How does it change accounting, finance, energy trading, how we explore for energy. So that is something that we're just scratching the surface, and I think we'll see so many new things happen in the next 5 to 10 years. And then on the electric utility side, which is a very old industry, right? That's more than 150 years old. There's massive changes happening with the integration of renewables. For example, if you see Texas, the amount of solar and wind that's connected to the grid in Texas is, in fact, more than California this year. So it complicates the grid. And the objective here is that, we make the grid greener, but we do it in a way that is, highly cost effective. So there's a big role of technology, data analysis, cloud computing, AI, machine learning, field sensors, compute on the edge, many other topics which will come into play. So I think it's exciting problems that we're trying to solve. And the next 10 years, I feel, will be very interesting.
I agree with that. There's so much is happening from energy transition to revolution, and those things brings new opportunities for the people who wants to enter this industry, or if they are already in this industry or they want to grow with it. So there are opportunities for everyone. One other thing I want to highlight, which is not related to technology, but is related to the traits that you have, is investing, and how investing help you to grow in your career. Can you talk about that one?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always exciting topic for me. I started investing when I was 22, but I wouldn't call it investing what I was doing back then. It was more gambling. And, it was many ups and downs, mostly downs, which in fact taught me a lot of lessons, right? But I think the biggest thing with investing that helped me in my professional career was I was always interested to see how I can predict the future. And I invested in many oil companies, many technology companies over the last 20 years. And some I was right and some I was wrong. But I think the common thread there is that once you invest in a company, you have some skin in the game. And that compels you to do more research, right? And you look for signs, you look for signals, you seek information. So you go listen to the earnings calls of the public companies that you've invested in. Then you talk to people to learn more about the company. So I think it kind of compels you to seek information to make sure that you're right or to make sure that you're not wrong, right? And I think that really helped me go above and beyond of what I would usually do for work. And that I think gave me an edge where I was able to not just understand the technology of, let's say, how electric motors or compressors or turbines work, or the sales aspect, which is more account management, but I was truly able to understand the business aspect of how these companies are thinking about the future. Customer that I'm also invested in, I was able to really understand what are the business objectives of the CEO of that company so that when I go talk to my customers, I know what I need to focus on, what do they care about, and what is not a priority for them. So I think that was a very good angle. And I think the second piece I'll touch on is, you know, you're either right or wrong, right? There's no maybe. So whether the stock goes up or down, so it's not a debate. It's not a debate that continues forever. You find out the answer maybe in a month, 6 months, or a year. So I think that kind
Yes.
of shatters your biases or egos that you have. So if you had a bias on a certain technology and you felt that's the future, you go invest and the company goes down, you realize that maybe your bias is not right.
Sometimes we hang to those biases and try to convince ourselves that this will get better. We see, even though we see all the signs might be going against our biases. But one thing
Exactly.
you made it very interesting, like how investing help you to understand the business itself. That's a perfect lesson for everyone. Like whatever you do in your personal and professional life, they both can be connected. From outside, it looks totally two different worlds. But if you want to take some learnings from one of your passion to another passion, and those things can be transferable. And here what you have shown. So you are passionate about investing, but that also help you to grow in your career and to achieve all the success. And I think that was also change in your mindset. Like when you were looking at what we discussed in the past, and that gives you a different mindset. So and also give you confidence. Like if you are successful in one industry, you can be successful in another industry. So
Exactly.
that's what you have shown. Also, in the past, you talked about some of the failures that you have experienced in this whole journey. So I will give you a chance. If you have to relive your journey again, what changes you will be making?
Yeah, I think I'll definitely answer that, but I'll say that learning. I mean, the best way of learning is failing at something and then realizing exactly where you're wrong or right, and having that strong feedback loop, right? So in terms of what I would change, I think there's many things I would change if I were to go back to my 20s, because I've learned a lot in the last 20 years. But one thing definitely is my own internal bias, right? And we've discussed this, Anand. Like there is the external bias where a society has a bias, and then you kind of fall into that bias as well. But then there's internal biases of what do you believe in versus what's reality, right? And the bigger the gap is between what's reality and what you believe in, right? The bigger the bias and the bigger the mistakes you'll make. So I think, when I was younger, I had lots of internal biases, and it was because of lack of experience in life, where I would think something cannot be done because XYZ, or I cannot
Yeah, yeah.
go into technology. Let's say, a big bias I had back in 2012 when I had to make a career decision when I finished my MBA, and I had to make a decision to which field do I want to pick? Do I want to stay with the traditional industrial companies or should I move into technology? And the bias I had was no way I could go work for a big tech company like Amazon, etc., because I don't have computer programming knowledge. But I didn't do the research
I
to really
agree.
understand. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. Like sometimes we just underestimate ourselves, and that's a big thing, as you said. When you are in heavy industry, then you have a very strong bias. You need to know those Java, Python to make this transition to technology company. So
Exactly,
I
exactly,
think most of us go through the same emotion or same experience in our journey as well.
exactly. So I wish I had known, right? Like, so I had convinced myself that, you have to know programming and there's no other way. So I somewhat pigeonholed myself into a career, right? When I could have explored more options. So I think that's one example, but there's many examples. There's biases I had in investing, which caused me a lot of pain. Yeah. So I think that's kind of fighting the internal biases. I feel would be something I wish I could change, but it's never late, right? Never,
Exactly.
never too late.
It's never late, definitely. Like if you realized that was the weak point, then you can always come over those points. You can make yourself better. So that comes to the last point that I want to ask you. Now, we have discussed about how your transition from heavy industry to software industry. We talked about the biases and also how your skill of investing helped you to grow in your career. But at the end, if you have to summarize everything and to give one suggestion to our listeners, like who wants to do the same thing, what would be that suggestion or advice?
Yeah, I think I would say, if you're motivated to really change your career or do better in what you're doing, it could be any of those. I feel what worked for me, right? And ultimately you have to discover what works for you. But I think what worked for me was definitely maintaining a constant level of motivation. Because many times you get demotivated and then you know, you would convince yourself that, okay, that's not the path I need to take. But I think, and that's a good example for you, Anand, also, like, watching you in your career, you always had a very high and consistent motivation level. So that made you explore other opportunities and keep pushing harder and harder. So I think that's a key part, right? Maintaining a high motivation level. And I think life is complicated, right? You have many things happening in life and which kind of sometimes would knock you down. So that's one. I'll summarize some things I've learned from my experience at Amazon, right? Which is you should always think big. You should always aim for the stars. And we say that, but we don't usually do it, right? But you have to think big. You have to think realistic, but also big, and think about how far you can take an opportunity for yourself and keep exploring what that think big would look like or what would success look like for you. Right? That's number one. And I think that keeps the motivation level high. Number two is always be curious, right? I think no matter how old you are, I feel this is kind of underestimated, but if I look at my 4-year-old son, he's always asking questions on something, right? And I feel like as we
They
get
are really
older,
curious.
yeah, they're very curious. And I'm sure you've noticed this with your kids too. And then I feel like as one gets older, you know, in some cases, the curiosity level goes down, or you feel like you know what you've seen before. That's true to an extent, but I think maintaining that high curiosity level is as important as maintaining the high motivation. So really taking that approach of, hey, I want to keep learning something different. And also talking to people who are outside your industry, right? That opens up a new world that you might not thought existed, but also talking to people who think differently than you, right? Who have a different opinion, because that kind of gives you some good counter arguments that you haven't heard before that might change your perception. So I think that that's all part of being curious and also intellectually curious about things.
You're well summarized. Thinking big, curiosity, and also learning from the people outside your industry.
The last piece I'll say is, one thing that worked very well for me is diving deep into a problem or a technology that you're focused on. And I know we do that professionally, but really spending the time to look at a topic from multiple angles, whether it's investment, whether it's a career move. I think because most people kind of do the surface level stuff, but they don't take the time to really understand whatever they're learning. So I think doing that gives you an edge and really shows people that you know what you're talking about. So I think that paid off well for me on certain topics.
Definitely. And deep dive, this is a big topic. Sometimes we are interested in something, but we go superficially. Like we just see from outside, we learn from outside, but that's not enough. The deep dive is making a big difference between you or somebody else who have made it big or who have not made it big. So that's really good point, Nishant. So with that, we come to the end. I wish we could have more discussion, but we connect again and we continue this discussion. But for today, I will say thank you, Nishant, for joining us and sharing your inspiring story.
Thanks, Anand. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you to our listener. I hope you have enjoyed today's story. Be connected, and we'll come back with another good story next week. With that, have a good day. Take care.